Welcome to the Bottom Line Podcast with Nicholas Kuzmich, where we discuss what matters most, the bottom line, featuring the top minds in their industry. Now, let's get started.
All right, everybody. Nicholas Kuzmich here, host of the Bottom Line Podcast, where I connect with industry leaders and sometimes industry sleepers to discuss what matters most. And that, to me, at the end of the day, is the bottom line. In fact, Tom, that's why it's called the bottom line, because it has like these double innuendo. Bottom line as in like bottom line profits of a business versus top line and all that other fun stuff. But also bottom line as like when everything else is taken away, what is the bottom line and what is the bottom line for you? And Tom, we're going to talk about that in just a second. But past guests of the podcast include people like the founder of Objection Box, Bill Walsh, one of the OGs of high ticket marketing, Russ Ruffino, the founders of Closer.io, Cole Gordon, and so many more, all of which you can listen to however you listen to podcasts. This episode, like all episodes, are brought to you by my own company, H2H Media Group. It's a company that I founded where we basically specialize in helping premium information business generate more qualified leads without traditional funnels, using no nonsense, common sense marketing. And Tom, at this point, I usually like to give like a bit of a highlight of someone who's working on something cool that's a client of mine. But I just realized that not only are we friends, and I'm your client, but you're my client as well, which we're going to all unfold in this process. But, you know, it wasn't that long ago that you had this brilliant idea, wanted to see how we can take it to the marketplace. And, you know, we built a bit of a fast track process for you in just like 10 seconds or less. Can you let people know what, how that's been going? Well, not really what it is, because we're going to dive into that in just a second, but how that's been going and what that experience has been like.
It actually exceeded my expectations. We have more leads coming in that we now had to hire a next second and third salesperson so that I can free up my calendar, because it was basically taking over my life with the amount of leads that were getting added to the calendar. So yes, it has been, I have to say, a home run. So, and actually one of the demo calls I did today said, hey, who does your marketing funnel? It was so great. And that's why I referred to you today. It's funny how even the people I'm doing demo calls were impressed with the funnel.
Oh, that's so great. And it's half tongue in cheek, but like one of the things we do tell people is that if you're going to build a fast track, the number one problem you're probably going to encounter at some point is sales. It's like, because you don't want to do all your sales, then you got to hire a sales team. And that's a whole nother conversation in and of its own. But anyways, that's what H2H does. Go to nicholaskuzmich.com if you want more information. So first, Tom, welcome to the Bottom Line Podcast. I don't like reading kind of like your typical introductions and listing off your great biography of everything you've accomplished. So maybe in your own words, however long or however short you want to take, because this could spawn into a very interesting conversation. How would you answer the question, who are you? What do you do? And tell me a little bit about the company and or companies that you run. And then we'll go from there.
Yeah, great question. I guess you would classify me as a serial entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I'm very good at the vision and starting a company. I'm not good at operating or growing a company. So how I got to the level that I'm at today and the number of companies and the companies I invest in, I couldn't tell you how I did it, but I do have some ideas that I will share with you of what got me there. But technically just, I love building businesses.
Right.
I want to work for myself. I can't work for other people. And, you know, that's kind of what started me on my journey, you know, I think 15 or so years ago.
I love that. Highly unemployable. That being said, just to give people a little bit of context between your businesses, your portfolio businesses, some of the investments you make, just for context. And again, I know Tom better than most, and Tom doesn't really like talking about himself too much or bragging about all his accomplishments. So I kind of have to help with that process. But like, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about, well, I don't want to put numbers in, like, what have you actually accomplished if you're willing to share?
If you want to take a total portfolio of all my companies' value, close to about 100 million.
Yeah. So we're not, this is not just some serial entrepreneur who started as a coach in his basement 15 years ago and is selling onesie twosie trinkets here or teaching people about AI. We're talking about a $100 million portfolio in businesses. And so there's a lot to divulge into and learn from, and talk about. So Tom, I'm excited to talk about some of those things. Before we dive into maybe some of the background, the history, one of the companies that maybe that's most publicly known right now and something that you're currently working on, which I'm super stoked about. Let me just throw like a little icebreaker question in here just to see where this direction might go. And that is this: if you were to look back on your life, not just on the 15 years of entrepreneurship, but even before that, what would you say was one of the most pivotal, like turning point, either experiences or decisions that you had to make that really ended up, I mean, for the lack of a better term, being a game changer for you, being a tipping point that really course corrected or changed the direction of your life or your business?
Yeah, I think there's actually two
Okay.
things that really stick out. The first one is I started my first technology company working in the basement and on weekends and nights while still working for my brother's company as, a safety manager.
Wow.
So at night on the weekends, I was just constantly I'm not a coder, but I would work with the people. We would do marketing, SEO, anything we could to build the company.
Yeah.
And it was a very tough decision while working for a family business to make the decision to go all in. So I did that about 2014.
Right.
And that was probably one of the hardest decisions to tell my brother, hey, bud, I love you, but I'm going to try doing this thing on my own.
Yeah.
And I think it really broke his heart when I did that. But it
Mm.
was the smart move at the time to really kind of force me to get rid of the safety net. And the hard part was I had little kids. So,
Even harder.
basically going from getting a guaranteed salary, just a stable paycheck to now just fighting for my life, I think is
Wow.
probably what needed to happen to really kind of put me in the right path. And then the second thing is very early on in my journey, after I did go off on my own, I found a group of people, a tech founder group that I joined and just basically implemented everything they told me to implement.
Mm.
And that was the biggest thing. I went in there with no ego. And I think one of the biggest things, one of my biggest, character traits that has benefited me is I can easily let go. Meaning I don't need to control every aspect of my company. Right now, I don't run any company. I have a CEO and a COO that runs pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for, I think, founders to be able to just let go and trust it in the hands of somebody else that can
Yeah.
do things so much better, which is why I said at the beginning, like, I'm not very good at, I can come up with a vision and I can start the company, but I'm not very good at growing or scaling it. I can get it to a certain point, which is the point that I love, but at a certain point, I just can't do it anymore. And I need someone to come in and do it for me.
You just unloaded, whether you know it or not, so much gold there that I would like to dive a little deeper into if you don't mind. Like
Yeah.
one of the things you said was it was a pivotal point because you had to come to this realization of going all in, which meant in your case, I've got young kids, letting go of the trusted salary, it being a family thing. So you have to also deal with like the family stuff. A friend of mine, Sam, actually Dan's media partner who runs media, has a tattoo on his arm, and the tattoo is of the Spanish ships that basically said when they landed on the island, burn all the ships so there's no going back. It makes for a great platitude, right? Oh, burn the ships or burn the bridges so you can't go back. In your opinion, how important is that all in mentality where you don't have options to go back? Like, is that necessary as an entrepreneur or to delve on the next thing? Is that necessary or is it just right for you? Or what would you say about like this whole all in mentality?
I don't know, but that what you just said there is getting me emotional because it was such a hard conversation to have
Right.
all across the board, even with my wife. When I have, at the time, I think a 2 year old and then like a newborn, and basically trusting my wife would be okay with it, saying, honey, I don't know how much money we're going to make, and we're going to have to figure out how to live on no money, on just what we saved. And that was a very tough, hard
Yeah.
decision to make. And that's not just for me. Like I was already bought in, but I had somebody else that needed to be bought in because if my wife wasn't bought in at the time, there's no
Yeah.
way that we would have done it. And she trusted in me, which
Wow.
I think is the biggest thing, which gave me also the confidence to be able to push forward. and not give up and not go back. And it's funny that I don't know if you can see my eyes, but I'm getting emotional here. You probably hear my voice a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where if you have a safety net or if you have a fallback plan, which I guess technically I did, but I didn't want that for my life. I've always wanted to own my own business. I've always wanted to be successful. I've always, at the time, wanted a tech company. For some reason, it was when tech was starting to come in. Like, I just want to be in technology. That's the hot new thing. And I just was putting in so much work it was a side hustle for so many years.
Right.
That it was almost like a shit or get off the pot moment. It's like I either have to keep going forward or just be a safety manager for my entire life. And I hated being a safety manager. So it was just one of those moments that I had to make that decision. And I think everybody has to make that decision at some point where you have to go all in and you just can't look back and you can't have any regrets, because I think the biggest thing I would have had was, you know what, I should have done that. If we were looking at this time now, I would be looking at that moment, especially with everything that happened, which I'll unpack later. I would have looked back and been like, man, I should have just taken the leap. And I'm just glad I did. And I'm just glad my wife is such a strong person that, she trusted in me to really give me the encouragement to do it.
Would it have been worth it? Because clearly you didn't, or maybe you did, correct me if I'm wrong. My assumption is when you left that first time and said, I'm just going to go for it, you couldn't have foresaw or foreseen the Tom Kelly of today, the $100 million portfolio, all the things that you're doing. Or did you see that and that's what drove you to it? Or maybe the other way to ask it is, if the results weren't what they are today, would it have still been worth it to make that leap and go all in?
It definitely would have been worth it, no matter what would happen, right? As far as seeing how big it has gotten, I'm not done yet. I don't even think it's there yet.
Yeah.
And so like my vision is so big that where I'm at now, I'm still embarrassed about it. But that's a lot of people. And so when you say I'm a humble guy, it's because I have not hit the level that I have been thinking about for 30 years in my head, right? My end goal is the $1 billion plus. And so it's like, when you're like, oh, you're a humble person, your company's this big, it's really, it's, you got a nice, you did a good job.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, well, I haven't done anything yet. So like, I'm still going for it.
I love that. You also seem to have a tremendous amount of self-awareness. And what I mean by that is like, you realize that you had no ego. You were part of this group. You weren't uncomfortable letting go of control, which is like a big thing for people.
Yeah.
Is that just self-awareness to say, I'm a great starter, but not a great finisher? So I need to, because like, I think the key at some point to any business is hiring the right team. And sometimes that means replacing you as a CEO. Sometimes that just means you understanding and taking a step back in roles that you're not good at. But I feel like for a lot, that's a big chasm to jump from being a founder to this thing revolves around me to I've reached the point where I've got to let go of some of that control and bring in the people who can actually do this way better than me. Is that a mind thing or a mindset thing? Is that just a self-awareness thing? And what would you say to the person who says, I want to grow, but I'm scared to let go of control?
Well, I think being scared of letting go of control is kind of preventing you from growing, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's good at getting to a certain point, and then you just have to eventually realize, like, are you the person that can get you 5 times bigger than what you are today?
Yeah, right.
And if you were that person, how come you are not 5 times bigger than you are today, right? So you got to think about it that way. But I think it does come down to mindset. I look at it like I have this big vision of where I want to go and where I want to end up. And I understand that I'm not going to be the one that can totally get me there, right? You definitely need the people. It's the who, not the how, right? Yep. And really, my companies didn't start growing until I stepped back, and still I gave up the control. And then you just have to trust, right? I just got lucky with some amazing people in my leadership roles, and they are just rock stars. They're all A players, and so and still to this day, like I pay, other than distributions and all that great stuff, like they make more money than I do, right? And that's what I want. Like your team, especially as you're going and early on, like they should be making more money than you if they're doing the majority of the work. And the more you can pay them and be okay with somebody else, a CEO or a COO making more money than you in the form of a salary, because they're that A player, but they're getting you there further, it's okay. And you have to not have that ego that is going to be like, no, I got to make the most money. No, just I'll pay you more money, just make my distribution bigger.
But that's I've actually never heard anyone talk about it like that. Right. Because sometimes the founder's like, yeah, I'll hire, but I still want to be the highest paid person in my industry, in my business. And there's ego involved in there. I've never actually heard it described quite like that. And that's actually a wonderful perspective. Now, speaking of perspective, I know we jumped ahead a little bit. Why don't we just kind of take us back to the beginning of the entrepreneurial journey? So you obviously stepped away. You said you wanted to do something in tech. What did again, you can expand or contract as much as you want, but what does the last 15 years look like from the moment you said, all right, everyone, strap in, we're going to start a tech company, to, the various companies that are in your portfolio now, all that you do now? Like, walk us through some of the highlights there just to get people kind of updated.
Yeah, so it basically all started in 2007. I started an online auction company for charities. So charity auctions today. And you notice that charity auctions today, back in the day when I was all into SEO, those are great keywords to have, right? So you can rank number one. And that's actually how we grew. We didn't spend any money on advertising. Wow. I just focused on SEO because I couldn't get myself to have enough money to pay for advertising. And two, I didn't know how to advertise, but I knew how to rank higher. So, because I just researched the heck out of it. And so that has been, kind of the first company that I started and has grown. I mean, we've raised, helped 250,000 organizations raise $500 million. So it's been a long time. And it wasn't really until 2014 where that's the all-in moment, right? And so that's where we started to really grow. And now we kind of, we make it free for people to use. So organizations use, and then we just collect a small percentage on the back end.
Right.
Back in the day, I charged up front and it didn't grow that much because nonprofits, they don't like to pay, or they don't have money to pay. So,
well, that's an interesting even point about like offer and pricing. Like, did you just come to that realization that, oh my gosh, we're charging up front, but nonprofits can't afford to pay up front? Like, what was the realization? Because that was a key moment from the infancy of the company to actually growing into what it is today. How'd you stumble across what ended up being a very important decision in the business there?
A lot of R&D. And what I mean by that is rob and duplicating. So I basically just looked at what other, fundraising software was starting to do at the time, which was no upfront fees, and we'll just take a percentage on the back end.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think that'll work for us. But then I just took I'm the type of person is, if we don't try it, we'll never know. And so that was kind of one of the tests that we did. And as soon as we implemented that, our conversion rates went through the roof, and we were already getting a ton of traffic because we would rank number one for every keyword in our niche.
Related, yeah.
And as soon as we took off the pay to play, model, and we say, hey, just get in, run your auction. If it's successful, pay us. If it's not, then you don't lose anything. And our conversion rates went through the roof at that point. And then from there, it just took off. So yeah, that was a great thing, but it was all about just going out to the market, seeing what everybody else was doing at the time, and just, giving it a shot.
What do you call R&D again?
Rob and duplicating.
Rob and duplicate. It's kind of like an Austin Kleon. He wrote a book, Steal Like an Artist. It's like the same idea, but I like that R&D, Rob and duplicate. I love that. So, that was one key thing, obviously, is understanding an offer to match the market by doing a ton of implementation on everything you can to start seeing some traction. What else, if anything, can you remember that was a key lever to help grow? Like, was there another inflection point, another key understanding to help take it even further?
Yeah, I mean, really from there, it's basically self-development and education and getting around people that are also in tech. If you're in tech, so get around the people that are doing the same type of, industry or business, and get in those mastermind groups. Right. I joined SaaS Academy back then, and it's still going on today. But they just, every time we got together, they just implement a new framework of, hey, do this and it'll increase conversions. Do this and it'll increase leads. Do this and it'll increase sales. Do this, it'll do this. And every time I left one of those meetings, I implemented, there were so many things that I had to implement that I couldn't implement everything, but I would just take the ones that were the easiest to implement, and I just started implementing them. And I just said, you told me to implement this, and I did, and it got me this result. Yep. And then I would just compound that every time I would go to these, get these ideas and these frameworks. And it was just, again, not doubting that they wouldn't work. It was just trusting that they would work is really what it comes, and just doing it. And that's, one of the things that I think I'm very good at, again, with letting go of the idea that I have it perfectly right every time. Because I don't. Like I didn't know anything about tech. I just got in there and I just started hustling.
I just wanted to be a tech founder.
Yeah. Exactly. That's all. I manifested everything. So I just said, I want to be a tech founder. And the universe gave me that, right? And then it's like, okay, now I want to get to $1 billion. Okay, well, it's slowly giving me that. We're on route.
Right?
Yeah. So, but just definitely implementing and just trusting that it will implement. And don't think that it won't work for you. Everybody thinks, oh, that strategy won't work for me. Yeah, most likely it will. You just have to give it a try.
Actually, that's such great advice, because I find with entrepreneurs, like we coach people in some of the marketing space as well. And it's like, we'll give someone a script or a template, and like, it feels like the immediate reaction is, how can I tweak this and modify the template? And I'm like, just follow it, just do it but no, let me just. So it's actually, I think there's some kind of a weird thing in all of our brains to say, like, it can't be that easy. Don't just implement it. You got to do something with it. But I think the advice that you're giving away here is, just take the advice from the leaders, from the masterminds, from the people who know what they're doing, take the frameworks, take what's proven, and just implement it. Would you say there's such a thing as too much implementation, where you can get so busy and so carried away? Or is it just, is that part of R&D? Just do, work, stick with what works and drop what doesn't?
Yeah. I mean, my philosophy was, if we don't at least try it, we'll never know, because we might try something and it bombs. Okay, perfect. And then when we're in the, tech industry, we can easily we can spin something up quick, test it. And if it doesn't work, we drop it. Right. Or we double down if it does work. Right. So it's kind of like the marketing funnel that you built me. Right now, my problem is it broke my sales. It broke my calendar. Right. So like, I have to now, instead, I can't tell you to shut it off, because that would be bad. I would never tell myself to shut off leads. Sure. So now I got to rush to put somebody in place to help cover some more of them. Right. So it's just one of those things where you just got to just keep pushing forward and just don't stop.
Like, and those are not bad problems, like problems to fix because of growth or leads or whatever, advancement or user information. That's not a bad thing. I want to go into what you're working on now, but just before, you casually drop this line that I think is interesting, because it's come up in previous interviews in many different aspects. But you said, I wanted to be a tech founder and I manifested that. And I want to be a billionaire and I'm manifesting that. What does that actually mean to you when you say I'm manifesting that?
Well, I could write I just manifested a book name for this, that I'm going to write a book about this. We go. Actually. Yeah. Okay. So it's funny, because this is the kind of the new thing that I've been slowly getting into. Right.
Okay.
And I honestly believe that there is something, like, I don't want to say we live in the Matrix or we're in a simulation.
Well, kind of do, but sure.
Yeah. I just don't want to say that, because I don't want to come off as like a conspiracy guy or whatever. I don't know. But I honestly think there is something out there that if you focus your attention on a specific thing in a specific way, you can bring all of that into your world. Mm-hmm. Like the companies that I built today, I have no idea how they happen. Like, you asked me, hey, give me the strategy, give me the play-by-play, the framework of how to do it. It's like, I can't tell you how I do it. All I know is it's exactly what I wanted, and I never wavered from that. Wow. And, that again, will go into the manifestation portion of it, but it's constantly a tip I would give for that is, put yourself in the feeling that you've already, are the 100 millionaire and the billionaire and
Yeah.
all of these things. Like you have to live it like you're already there.
Yeah.
And Dan Martell says it best, where he's like, dude, if you want to go manifest, or if you want to buy, that McLaren 720S, well, go sit in it, go start the engine, go feel the vibration when you started, and listen to the engine roar, and just get that feeling, and then just constantly leave there and still feel that feeling everywhere you go. And, slowly things will just the world just start opening up, and the opportunities will come to you.
I love that. Have you seen there's a new trend going on where you sit down and you write down like all of the things you want to accomplish and just dream a little, like a dream exercise. There's nothing new there, obviously. And then you put it in like a GPT prompt and say, can you rewrite this as though it's a day in the life of something I've already accomplished? And they write it. And what's trending now that I'm seeing is just the reaction videos of people reading their own day in the life as though it's happening. And you just see, whether you believe this or not, in terms of like whatever you believe about matrix and energies and manifestation and traction, whatever, doesn't matter. What you can't deny is when someone reads that for the first time, everything about them changes. Their demeanor changes. They sit up, they smile, they cry. There's just something inside of them that changes. And it's just when you bring this up of like your future self. I keep hearing that word lots lately, but it may be worth a try to write out all your dreams as though, whatever they are, and then have something like AI respit it back at you as though it's already happened and what a day in the life looks like for you, just to sync up your internals with that idea and just see what happens. What do you make of that, or what do you think of that as an exercise?
Well, I like the concept. I haven't heard that one, but I think what it comes down to is it helps to increase your vibration and your frequency, right? And I don't know any successful person that I've ever talked to believes the same things I believe when it comes to this. Like if we would tell the normal person, even in our family, that doesn't have dreams or aspirations, like, hey, if you just did this, your whole life would change. They're like, yeah, whatever, dude.
Yeah, right.
But you talk to all the successful people and they're like, yeah, that's pretty much exactly what I did. And that's how it happens. And it's like, it's so weird how, if you just took the time to actually, again, let go and just trust that, hey, what this person's telling me, that, hey, if you just be calm, you put your vision out here like that, you control your vibration and your frequency and your thoughts, you're going to bring all of this stuff into your world, and just say, it sounds crazy and far-fetched, but if I just believe it and just attempt to try it, it just might happen. And what do you have to lose? It doesn't happen. Oh no, you try.
Not the end
but
of the world.
What if you try it and all your dreams come true?
Yeah. And would you say that it starts to happen by means of things around you that start opening up invitations for you to step into? People you meet, masterminds to join, playbooks to follow, joint venture partners who've kind of come out of nowhere and said, let's do this. Like, I think that's the part where people just don't talk about when they talk about this kind of stuff, is when you're aligned with that stuff and you're just unconditionally open to allowing this stuff into your life. And then you just pay attention. Like, a great example of this is, like, again, Dan introducing us talking about marketing for something, me learning about the thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need this for my own life. I couldn't have created that. I couldn't have imagined it for a certain degree, but I could say, hey, these are things that are important to myself and my wife, Farron. And all of a sudden something happened, an introduction happened. We talked, and now we're doing this thing with you. So I think people just need to realize that it's not like you just sit there with your eyes closed and you hum and you hope that all of a sudden it just appears before your eyes. But when you're in resonance with that, things just start to come your way. And then it's up to you whether or not you want to step into those invitations and to those opportunities that make it across your desk, if you will. Would you agree to that?
100%. Because if you're not, like, if you don't set that big vision and that big dream of where you want to go, you're going to miss all those little opportunities that come your way that you're just not even thinking about or open to. And again, when Dan said, hey, reach out to Nick, he wants to do this, I could have, at the beginning, I was like, do I really need this? I don't know if I want to. Like, I've done this 1,000 times before.
Right.
And I'm like, all right, I'll give it a shot. Like, again, trusting somebody that's already been where you want to go, and just knowing that they have your best interest at heart. And just, going for it is really kind of what you need to do. And, obviously when you're doing anything for self-development, to go to the person that has already been to where you want to be.
Yeah.
And you can't, like, I saw a post online the other day where, a kid wants to be super successful and start a business. And the advice was, well, just don't talk to your parents. Just start doing it, because you're going to ask your parents for advice and they're going to give you what they know, but they're nowhere near what your vision for yourself is.
Yeah.
So why would you let their opinion influence the things that you want to do? Why don't you just go hustle, do what you want to do, see and become successful? And they just want you to be proud of them. Right. And so, I thought that was great advice, because it just comes down to, like, you got to listen to the people that are already at where you want to go, because they know the steps to get there. But you then have to trust that what they tell you, that just follow it.
You got to do it.
And just go with it. You just got to do it.
Yeah.
That's the problem, is, like, I could tell people all until I'm blue in the face, like,
Yeah.
dude, this is what I did.
Yeah.
No, you didn't. No, you did something more than that. It's like, no,
you must
dude,
have done it another way or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, this is exactly what I did and still do today. And they're like, okay, that sounds great. Or that's too much work.
Yeah. No.
It's like, then you really just want to be,
exactly.
Going.
Exactly. So we've alluded to it a little bit, but I can't, we have to just get into it. And that's what it is that you're working on now. So rather than me even trying to explain it or even tease it, can you maybe tell the story of how you got into it? And I don't know this story, to be honest with you, but to tell the story of how you got into what you're doing now, what it is that you're doing now, what people need to know about it. I'm obviously going to have a ton of questions along the way, but I think it's important for every successful entrepreneur to hear what you're about to say, because it fills such a big need in all of our hearts and lives. So, like, how'd you come about it? What are you doing? What's happening there? And again, I might just interject with some questions or clarity points as you go along the way.
Yeah, great. So what I do now is I help entrepreneurs create family foundations. And how I got into this world, and I do this with my wife. This is her and I do this together. It's really just something that we like to do, because there was a gap, a need that we needed to fill. And everybody brings in at these masterminds, and everybody talks about trusts and protecting your assets. But I think trusts are shit. You can't do anything with a trust. Yeah, you can't do anything with a trust while you're alive. All it does is protect your assets after you're dead. And then your kids either have to hire an attorney or a banker to manage your wealth and divvy it up and give it out at certain times and do different things, and hope that your family doesn't butt heads because somebody isn't, managing it properly. And so I have trusts. Like, I do have one in place, and I always will, while it's there, while I'm, still doing my thing. But I don't know what a trust does. I don't know how it works, and it doesn't do anything for me. Right.
And just for clarity, like, we're talking about, like, the most commonly used instrument in financial planning when it comes to, like, legacy and passing things down. Like, this is an instrument that God knows who created however long. And we're saying at the fundamental core, the thing that most people have in place, if you're looking for legacy and wanting to take care of your family and all that, is a trust. And you're saying this is bullshit for the various reasons you explained now. And there's an alternative.
Yeah. Well, it's bullshit because it doesn't do anything, while I'm alive. Right. And then I'm just pushing the buck down to my kids and hope that they don't have infighting and hate each other after they divvy up. Because you've heard all the stories of, all of the siblings fighting over the trust because, someone didn't get this, or the executor is now managing, controlling this. And there's all this shit going on, because what happens is all of your heirs that haven't, most likely haven't worked or haven't made significant amount of money is trying to divvy up a significant amount of money. And now everybody gets greedy. Right. And so that's the problem. And so, again, I still have a trust in place, and there's reasons why I still do. But the family foundation is the thing that I found that helps me to put a vehicle in place for my kids to be work in and learn how to manage money, grow money, and give money away. And give my money away. They're not giving their money away. They're giving my money that I worked hard for, because I don't want to give lump sums of cash to my kids. And I'm going to tell you why in a second.
Yeah.
In 2018, my brother passed away. And so this is the brother I work for. A very successful business, about 50 million a year. He was divorced twice, and my niece and nephew were 17 and 19 at the time. Well, because the mother wasn't there, my oldest niece was in charge of the estate. And what happened was they, divvy up the money.
Right.
There's some infighting there because my nephew thought, he wasn't being involved enough and this and that. And, 4 years later, they're out of money. It's like you blew through so much money, because again, our kids, of any successful person that has significant amount of income are just entitled. We're giving them the next Starbucks load on their phone and their Robux cards, and we're paying for everything. And when you leave them lump sums of cash, it's just setting them up for failure, right?
Right.
And so that was kind of, my wife and I looked at each other and we're like, we never want this to happen to our kids. And so I want my kids to be successful, and I want to give them a vehicle to always have money available, but I don't want to give them lump sums. My kids will get lump sums. It's just going to happen at some point. We have assets outside. But the family foundation was the only vehicle where I knew that I can put money in, and I can fund it with money that I would normally pay in taxes, and I can fund it with assets that I can donate in and take, no capital gains and things like that. Where my kids now at 9, 11, and 13 are in charge of every quarter researching nonprofits, going in volunteering, actually donating. Each one of them has an allocated amount of money that they have to donate to different nonprofits. So the money that I'm normally paying in taxes, I'm now putting in my family foundation, and now my kids are involved in the family foundation. Every summer when my kids are not in school, I can't get them to come into the office when I'm going to pay them cash to shred paper, bring me coffee, file some paperwork. But the family foundation, when I'm like, hey, let's go research some charities, let's go volunteer and see if you want to donate money to them. Once they start doing that, they're like, oh, this is kind of fun. I can handle this. I like this. I'm helping people. And the first time that we knew that it actually was the right move was the first time my daughter, we make our kids hand out physical checks, right? And I suggest everybody do that.
Yeah, I love this.
And so the first time my wife and I knew that this was the right thing, my daughter, 12 at the time, she goes and she presents her first check to a founder of a small nonprofit. They make $55,000 a year in revenue.
Right.
And so the first check she hands over to the lady, and the lady's not expecting it. She opens it up and it's a check for $5,000. And so
from a 12-year-old.
Yeah. The founder starts crying because this just paid for their rent for like almost 2 months. She grabs my daughter in a big bear hug. My daughter's crying. My wife and I are crying. And the only thing I thought of when I left there was, why weren't we videotaping this?
Right.
Like, this was such a great moment. And we just have it in our memory, but it's like, it was such a moment that I wasn't expecting it. My wife wasn't expecting it. My daughter for sure wasn't expecting it.
Right.
And the love that my daughter felt from this founder was just, you can't replicate it. Right. And so now my daughter's like, okay, who can we help next? So now we're going to other nonprofits in our area, and where she's volunteering and doing a lot of cool stuff. And, it's just fun things to do. So, with our family foundation, we've given ourselves a vehicle that I can transfer in assets. So instead of having them in a trust, down the line, I can transfer my assets into my family foundation, grow my money in the family foundation. and then allow my kids to earn a paycheck out of it as they get older. I really want like my kids as they, if when my daughters are having, babies, if they're, if they need money, I want them to work for the family foundation to earn a paycheck so they can stay home, raise the kids, and not feel like they're burdened to have to go out and work. Because I don't want that. My wife raised our kids at home, right? And I want their retirement to be, I want them to work and have their retirement funded by the family foundation and support causes and do good work and then be compensated, by the family foundation. And I think that's a better way to, kind of help not raise entitled kids.
Right.
Because you're getting them involved early and young. And you're getting them to see how money is impacting other people that are less fortunate. Two, it teaches them that they have to grow the money if they want to keep doing this.
Sure.
And then three, it provides them a source of income when and if they need it at any point in time in their life. And also their kids and their kids. Like my wife and I's vision for our family foundation is 5 generations. So we're thinking 500 years down the road.
Right.
And, our money will be growing at a significant rate over those years. And it will be funding, not just making change in the world, by helping all of these nonprofits, but the big thing is making the change in the world that my kids are going to make because I'm raising these types of kids that are giving and they think about other people and not think about themselves. And I think that's just the one thing that when you give anyone that's never earned money, lump sums of like millions of dollars, or even or even hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Sure.
like, I think that's even worse. Like hundreds of thousands goes like that to somebody that's never earned it. So you give them millions and it's either going to become an addiction problem. They're going to blow it on things that don't make sense. And then they're going to be worse off than if they'd never had it in the first place.
Yeah. It sounds, and why we bought into it the first time we heard it was because it's a win-win-win. Like, I think any successful entrepreneur, one of their greatest fears is bringing up entitled children. Like that conversation happens all the time. Like the kids who fly business and have never sat in economy and then all this stuff, you want to teach them about life and put them in situations. But what happens if all you have is a trust and then they collect multi-million-dollar checks when you're gone? Like that's not serving anybody. So one, for the entrepreneur or for the person who, has accumulated some level of wealth, it prevents that entitlement, but partially because of everything you're talking about. So at this young age, you're teaching them about values and wealth and importance and giving and charity and all the things that are truly valuable to us can now be passed down in a very practical way to our children. And now they have incomes and they have jobs potentially, and they have an ability to take care of themselves over time. That's a second win. The other win is like, what about all the great nonprofits and charities that get to benefit from this? Had these foundations not exist. It's not like you hand an 18-year-old a $3 million check and the first thing they're thinking is, I wonder what charity I could give this to or who I could help. Like they're thinking, how many cars can I buy now? So the fact that the charity also benefits from this whole thing. There's the other side, which I know you don't like talking about, but it's just a matter of fact. The entrepreneur and the corporation benefits because there are some tax benefits. It's instead of paying, overpaying in taxes, you can reroute some of that money into the family foundation. So like there is really, and maybe the better question, I was going to say, it's hard to find anything wrong about this scenario versus other scenarios. Are there things that if you're not careful with, are considerations on maybe, it not being all bells and whistles and unicorns and pixie dust and cotton candy, or is it as good as it actually sounds?
I know that's one question I get all the time is, how come no one talks about this? And it sounds way too good to be true. But I'm going to go back really quick. One thing to just point back, if, by having a family foundation and a trust, it also, if your trust does happen to leave them millions of dollars and they blow through it, your family foundation is the safety net to say, hey, you messed up. You can still get a salary and do that. So that's kind of like your safety net for those people that still want to leave big lump sums, which, is fine. So, I mean, the drawbacks are, I believe nobody talks about this because there's more money in legal fees of setting up trusts and the bankers and all of that. There's no money in it. It's a one-time setup fee. And then all you do is you pay your filing fees to the government. My accountant spends 2 hours a year to fill out one form that is compliant, with the IRS for my family foundation. So there's not a lot of money in it, which is why nobody talks about it. And so, my wife and I do this because my wife saw the benefit that it was having on our life and our kids. And she's like, dude, so many entrepreneurs and wealthy people, like, don't they need this? I'm like, yeah, every time I talk about it, they all want it. She's like, well, why don't we just set these up for people? I'm like, all right, you could do that, but I don't want another business. And so I like doing the talking, but she's doing that, doing the actual setup and running. But no, I mean, the tax benefits are great because right now I'm funding it with money that I normally would have paid the government, right? So basically, simple math is, your adjusted gross income. You can take 30%, 30 to 60% of your adjusted gross income and move it into your family foundation tax-free. Now that lowers your adjusted gross income and the amount of money that you pay, you get taxed on by 30 to 60%. And really that's kind of the nice thing. So, you're funding it with the money that normally would have gone out. And you can now keep it into your family foundation and then you manage the money within it. The great thing about it, there is a downfall, right? You have to give away 5% of your asset value every year.
I'm not sure that's a downfall, but yeah, you do.
Yeah. But the downfall is if you give 4.9% or 4.8% away, you're going to get taxed, right? So just give away the 5% and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But even that is an upside because 95% of that money that you got tax-free can grow in any investment vehicle that's a safe investment vehicle, right? So if you have a wealth manager, if index funds, if you're into real estate and it's passive, you can make, your family foundation can invest in these different vehicles to grow the money. Your only requirement is that you have to give away 5% a year. And it's also part of that 5% is expenses. So the full 5% doesn't have to go to charity, all of it. But a lot of people I talk to, I'm like, just give the 5% away.
Yeah.
Your expenses in a private family foundation, especially at the beginning, are very minimal. So just try to give away as much as you can, because really we're setting these up to support other nonprofits. And my wife and I, we only like to work with people that are really building it like, like you are, where you just want to do it for your kids. And yes, the bonus from the business side are the tax savings, because that's just one major one, right? Is the adjusted gross income on the cash. But I mean, there's ways to donate property in and get the full, market value tax deduction and pay no capital gains and things like that. Those are other strategies that you can do for pretty much anything. You can donate crypto and you can donate stocks. You can donate anything to your family foundation to fund it.
Yeah, I think, well, the whole idea of like first giving away 5%, I think everybody, if you talk to them and they're honest about it, there's an element inside all of us that wants to give, right? There's something that we want to contribute to the greater good of humanity. This just acts as a nice forcing function. Cause I don't know how many years where I've said, yes, we wanted to give, we got distracted. We have all the good intentions and we had the means, but we all got distracted. And then the year end comes and we're like, oh, what did we get? Did we give anything? So the fact that we now have a family foundation is a beautiful forcing function, not just for us as parents, but for our kids to say, there is a portion of what you have that has to be given away. So let's collectively, come together and think about that. I know you were talking about some of the retreats you might be, carrying from people who have family foundation. And one of the ideas I love, I hope you're going to do this, is like that Shark Tank like thing where you bring nonprofits in, but they have to pitch to the kids, not the adults, and the kids collectively decide. Just so many cool benefits of that. I think one thing as a side bonus, I think the reduction of taxes is a nice side bonus. It's a great thing. It's not the main thing, but it's a great thing. Another side bonus that you alluded to is when you have a family foundation where you have to give away 5% to a nonprofit, all of a sudden in your community, you become the most popular dude around, right? Like, I know that that's not why we do it.
Yeah. I didn't
But
think
when
you were going to
people are
go
just
there, but yeah.
like, but there's a beautiful like networking effect. And I noticed that here, like we're in a small town in Kelowna. There's a lot of beautiful charities around that I didn't even know exist. But now that people are getting a sense that we are contributing and this is part of what we do, you learn about Mamas for Mamas and you learn about this farm I didn't even know existed, Helen Acres. It's in the middle of our city that produces 90% of all the like farming goods given to charities in Kelowna come from this one farm. And like, I didn't even know that existed, but all of a sudden now people are talking to you and you get to meet some cool people with awesome stories that you would have never met. And now, you know, your network grows like that. So I think, you know, obviously that's a cool extra benefit, obviously.
You know, it is.
It.
And like for my wife runs our family foundation, and for her, you know, she was a stay-at-home mom, you know, a teacher. And, you know, now, you know, they're inviting her to coffee and to lunch, and like her, like my success has turned into her significance.
I love that.
Like she feels so significant now that she now runs that, she's the CEO of the family foundation. So people are treating her and looking at her differently.
Yeah.
And it's something that's, if you want to talk about raising your vibration and raising your frequency, like that's a very easy way to do it, because I honestly feel love that you receive and love that you give helps to raise your vibration.
Yes.
And, you know, just having that and having the people, obviously they want you to donate to them, but they're showing you love, and they're asking for money for a good reason, because they're trying to help these types of people or this type of situation and make it better. And so they're showering you with love. And, you know, ultimately the problem is, you know, you have to say no to some people.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
And that's, you know, part of the thing. But again, that's why, you know, well, I shouldn't say that's why my wife handles it, because she says yes to everything. I'm the same way. Like I can't say no to anybody.
Yeah.
If you ask me face to face, it's usually like okay, we could do it.
Yeah, I love it. I got two more questions before we wrap up with one last question. But one of them is, I just want to give people a sense of like what can be done with a family foundation. And I remember when we first talked, you told me the Bill Gates and Warren Buffett story, which you're happy to tell again. You also told me how like sometimes you just go to your accountant and like, dude, I've got this thing. What do I do? And he comes up with creative ideas, like you were talking about potentially lending the McLaren for something. Like, give one or two stories just to get some people's creative juices flowing on what can be done with family foundations. And then the tying question is, because to your point, there's going to be entrepreneurs listening to this, just be like, Tom, that sounds great. I'm going to bring this up with my accountant. They're not going to know what you're talking about. I certainly don't want to do all the research and hire the people and figure it all out, which is what you do. So why don't you also, have to give a couple of the creative examples, talk about what you do for entrepreneurs, how it works, how it can be done with tax dollars and no out-of-pocket dollars, the services you provide, and you know what qualifies for someone to think about working with you on that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the most interesting strategy that my accountant came to me with. So the biggest thing back in the day, when you have your first really large tax bill, you go to your accountant and you say, can we get this down any further? And they're like, no, we can't. I'm like, come on, there's got to be something. He's like, hey, at least you made enough money to pay this amount of money. And for me, I was like, that's not acceptable. I was like, I don't like cutting a check like this. Yeah. So that's when, you know, it forced me to go find a solution. And that's where the family foundation came, because now we can go back and take another 60% of my adjusted gross income and move it in.
Right.
But once I brought him the family foundation, says, hey, Ryan, I now have a family foundation. He's like, Tom, why didn't you do this years ago? I'm like, why didn't you tell me about this years ago? Because my accountant just doesn't do it, and he didn't think about it. And that's the last thing on his mind. I'm one of multiple clients, and he just does his thing, right? He's you know, he does numbers. He doesn't think strategy, you know, anything like that. And so as soon as I started bringing him the family foundation, now he starts bringing me all of these ideas of how we can, you know, either buy assets through the foundation, how we can save money from any of my companies or my personal taxes. And so he comes to me. So we were talking, and I was asking you about, okay, well, I'm looking to buy a McLaren, and I asked you for your advice on it. And so I brought up to Ryan, because now I run everything by him to see how we can structure it in the most tax advantage way.
Right.
He's like, Tom, well, why don't you just buy it through the family foundation? And I said, I can buy a McLaren through a family foundation. He's like, yeah, let's buy through the family foundation, donate it a couple days a month to a nonprofit so that they can use it for publicity for an event, maybe take some underprivileged kids around or people in the community around. When you have a showroom of multiple, cars,
Yep.
open it up to the community, let the community tour it, give them inspiration. And as long as you're utilizing it in a way where you're buying an asset that isn't depreciating, and a lot of supercars, unless you're, beating them to death or they're your daily drivers, hopefully should keep their value or go up. And so I thought that was the most interesting thing. So it's like, all right, let's start buying some supercars, through here and donate them to the community. And it was funny because I did go to a nonprofit that I know locally, the founder, and I'm like, hey, if I ever brought you a supercar, how would you utilize it?
Right.
And he's like, well, I'd probably maybe auction off a day in the life, or maybe, so many hours in the supercar. Maybe we could do that for a charity auction item, or, just bring it in and I'll take photos of it and we'll post it on our thing, or we'll bring it to our live event and we'll just stick it outside and put some velvet ropes around it and people can take pictures with it.
Right.
And it's like, okay, we can definitely do that.
Yeah.
Now I know how you would utilize it.
Yeah.
Now it makes sense to me that we can make it work. Right.
Right.
So that's just it's just one of the most craziest ideas that has ever been brought to me. So, but as far as getting in my world, it's really just all of my website and social medias are realtomkelly.com. So REAL tomkelly.com, KELOY. I basically just do everything through there. And so you can get into my world by sending me follow me on Instagram and DM me family, and you'll get access to all of my playbooks. And from there, I give away how you can do it for yourself. Or if you want us to do it, which we can get it done 1,000 times faster.
Yeah. And easier,
obviously,
and less stress, and don't think about it. Yeah.
Exactly. A done for you service. Basically, we can do that. And we have so many, depending on your situation. I kind of alluded to one earlier today. I don't want to talk about it on camera.
Sure.
But, because I'm in the nonprofit software fundraising space, how we can utilize some of our technology to help grow your family foundation so you can get even more tax advantages. So it's just a lot of cool stuff. But really, the qualifications are, if you have like a household income of $300,000 or more, you can basically qualify, or anybody can qualify. You just have to have extra cash. I mean, you can start with as little as $5,000 a year that you're able to put in to your family foundation. I say anybody that has to pay the government at the end of the year a tax bill, qualifies.
Right.
Because again, you can then take some of that 30 or to 60% of that and put it into your family foundation to lower your tax liability, which could also put you into a lower tax bracket, by the way. So that's kind of the qualifying thing, is if you pay anything in taxes at the end of the year, you definitely qualify to own it. And the setup costs are very, very minimal. I mean, it's not even close to 5 figures, right? It's 4 figures to set something up. And, from there sky's the limit. I mean, we can do so much cool stuff, once you have it in place. But arming your CPA or accountant with a family foundation will just open up the possibility of so many different things that you can do.
Yeah, I again, just full transparency. I love the concept so much that Farron and I obviously got involved with it. And I'm telling everybody I know who's a successful entrepreneur that they got to get involved with it, because it's just, there's no reason not to. There's so many wins, so many upsides, and very few downsides, if any, for that matter. Tom, before we go, I do got one last question, but before I ask that question, anything else you want to say about this whole idea, this whole concept, anything about family foundations that people should know that might not?
I love you, but this is what's going to come into, like, I'm very naive and I'm very humble. Just follow me on social media. I'm not a salesperson, but this is what I love to do. And I love to just have these conversations. Like, I'll talk to anybody about this. But yeah, any of my social media accounts or my website, you can get more information and get in my world, and would love to have the conversations with you about it.
We'll provide some links as well below to ways that you can get in touch with Tom about all this. Okay. So one last question then is, let's say you're at an awards event, and Mr. Tom Kelly is about to achieve a lifetime achievement award. They call you up, everyone's clapping, you get on the stage, you get handed this Lifetime Achievement Award. What I want to know is when that microphone comes up and you've got a minute to share, who do you think? Who are the colleagues, the friends, the family members, the business partners, the mentors, the whomever? Who do you think and why?
To be honest, this is maybe a cliche thing, but I would definitely thank my wife, because if it wasn't for her and her acceptance to be poor for a very long time and stick with me through 15 years or 14 or 12, I don't even know how many years of complete just uncertainty of, am I even doing the right thing, and wanting to give up 100 times. She was the only one that kept pushing me forward. And she knows exactly what to do when I'm having a really bad day, how to cheer me up, how to just change my state so that I can get back to work the next day. She knows that when I come home in a really bad mood where I'm stressed, anxiety, to just sometimes just leave me alone, let me go to bed early, because she knows that when I wake up the next day, all of that's out of my head and I'm right back focused, ready to go. But I mean, a lot of significant others wouldn't have put up with that, right? They're very, they maybe think about themselves too much. And she's a very loving woman that has always encouraged me to keep pushing forward and take the leap, even when we had 2 little kids and, I was making like almost no money. Like, I mean, no money. I mean, like, I don't even know how we lived, and she pulled it together, and she wasn't working. And so it's like, oh shit, how do we do this? But I mean, definitely wouldn't be anywhere I am without her. And that's it. But I just think it comes down to, a solid family, a solid partner that will just always encourage you to be bigger and better. And she will get down on me like, Tom, you ain't living up to your potential. Get the frick out there and keep going.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, back in the day when I used to, party too hard and drink and do all that, she'd sit me down when I was all hungover and be like, Tom, this isn't you. You're not living up to your potential. There's so much more in you. And, those are the things that kind of push you to be like, you know what, you're right. I do have more potential in me. And so luckily I had somebody else that saw more of it in me than I did. And so, that's definitely the person, but there's so many people along the way, but talk to people that are smarter than you, that are already where you want to be, and just take their advice and just go with it. If they're successful for a reason, and just trust that, what they say will work, even if you don't think it will.
Yeah. I love that. Everybody, we've been talking to Tom Kelly, who's the founder of Charity Auctions Today and the whole idea of the family foundations. I want to remind everybody that there's only so many hours in a day, so stop wasting them on stuff that doesn't matter and focus on your bottom line. Have a great one, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Bottom Line Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.